Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 63. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. The noise in the background may give you an indication that I'm on my travels again, and I've come to a place that has its own place in history because it is of history. Just a few feet away from me, I can see the Grand Union Canal, which was a major part of industry in Northamptonshire. The industry of carriage, the industry of cargo. And to do that, I'm sitting in the Canal Museum at Stoke, and I've been joined by my guests for this edition of the podcast series, telling the stories of Northamptonshire through 100 objects. Hello, who are you?
Hello, my name is Julia Morgan. I am the Collections Officer South. I work with the Canal and River Trust, and we're here today at the Canal Museum, Stoke, which we own and operate.
And to you?
I'm Lorna York. I'm a genealogist and a historian. I write books and magazine articles, and I come from a long line of boatmen.
Julia, Lorna, welcome to the podcast series. Lorna, let me start with you, if I may. What is the significance of the inland waterways to Northamptonshire?
Northamptonshire is quite unique because it's in the middle of the country. And if you go to Watford Gap, which is a few miles from here, you have A5, Watling Street, the canal, the railway, and the M1, all passing through Northamptonshire. Northamptonshire is now well known for its warehouses. We are actually sitting in the original warehouse for the canal company.
And we're right at the top of it, which is why there's a wonderful echo with all kinds of exhibits around us. Back in the day, though, it would have been a place of industry.
Yes, definitely. This window that we're sitting by would be where the cargo would come in or go out. It's a vital piece of the Industrial Revolution.
At its height, just how busy was this stretch of water outside where we're sitting?
You would have maybe 50 or 60 boats passing through in a day.
So we're talking about the equivalent of heavy goods vehicles, not on roads, but on the water.
Yes, it's a water highway. The boatmen were, of course, lorry drivers of their day. Their main ambition was to make their cargo delivery quick, because the quicker they could do it, the more money they paid.
Time was money, of course. Julia, for this particular exhibition, people have come to see perhaps yesteryear, but what is the particular object that has made it into the exhibition, and what story does it tell?
This particular object is a stool that was painted by Frank Nurser of Braunston in the style that is known as castles and roses. So a very particular style that was formalised by canal folk, people working on the boats, people, boat builders and other people surrounding it.
It's a very decorative piece of work. Was that indicative of Frank Nurser as a painter? Or was it indicative of life on the canal waterways? What was it trying to achieve by being as bright and as vibrant as it is?
If you take a cabin, it's very plain inside. So the people who lived in the cabins wanted to make it more homely. Therefore, they came up with ideas of making it decorative. The paintings are actually what you call folk art. But if you look at pottery from the 1850s, you will see the same castles and roses. You will also see it in the French fabric, which is very bucolic. You have a castle, you have a river with a swan on, and a bridge. You will find that on lots of different things.
So this is a style that has been borrowed from elsewhere, rather than it being inherently of the canals themselves. Julia, when people were working on the canals, their world travelled with them. We're talking about people who lived in very small spaces.
Yes, you'd get potentially whole families living on the same 70-foot narrowboat. No indoor plumbing, no real private spaces. A lot of the children worked alongside their parents, either helping with the horses or different parts of cleaning and hauling. So it really was quite a self-contained life, really.
Lorna, we're talking about life on the water. We're doing so on a dry day. But with all 4 seasons to contend with, there would have been times when that sense of a small world being your own, it must have been quite oppressive to work on the canals.
Not really, because if you think of the canal as a linear village, they would have an interaction between a lot of people that were working on the canal, but they wouldn't have interaction with people that do not work on the canals. The towpath was only open to people that worked on the canal. The general public were not allowed on the canal. So therefore, it would have been lonely, but not lonely.
Even so, if you're working and living in a space that would have been no more than 6 foot wide and possibly 12 feet long, being the cabin on what was effectively a cargo vessel, it's no different to the cab on a 44-ton truck today. Your space would have been restricted, therefore your ability to be yourself would have been quite restricted too.
No, not really, because most of the time they weren't in the cabin. They were outside.
Why, therefore, was the decoration of people's belongings so important that someone like Frank Nurser could have had a style that would be now celebrated as we are doing so in this exhibition?
I think it's partially to do with what they were hauling. They took all different kinds of cargo, but we often find that the most brightly decorated vessels were things like a Samuel Barlow coal company, which were coal contractors. When you're hauling coal, everything gets dirty, it gets grimy, it gets everywhere. And I think you'd want something that would offset that kind of constant breathing in those kinds of dust particles. The canals aren't exactly the cleanest bodies of water that you could find as well, and you're going through different tunnels and it's quite dark at times. I think you'd want something to brighten up the spaces that when you were in there, it was important for them to still have things like art and music in their life.
Music is a very important part, not only of that life on the water. We've occasionally heard it whilst we've been recording here at the Canal Museum today. And in fact, you can still experience that kind of music if you actually spend some time here at the Canal Museum and see some of the boats that go through. Most of those now are tourist boats or they're recreational boats. So the inland waterways are still very much alive.
Oh, yeah.
The industry has changed, though.
If the industry hadn't changed, there wouldn't be any canals. They would have been filled in or used in a different way. But it's because of the industry as we have now that they've survived. Not all of them, but a big majority of them have survived as a recreational thing.
Just to go back to the object and its style, Lorna, you've said that the style was brought in, borrowed, if you like, by Frank Nurser. Did he paint to order? Was he a commissioned painter, or did he just keep knocking out pieces of work that people would then put on their boats?
No, they was commissioned. If you take the example of which we're sitting next to, Samuel Barlow, all of his boats were highly decorated. If you go to another carrier, they aren't so decorated. But the boatmen themselves would commission items to be painted, like the Stool that we're dealing with today, but also the wash-hand basins, the dippers, and various other pieces of equipment would be painted.
So if you say, I've got a Frank Nurser in the boat, that would be a point of pride?
It still is now. Highly prized. People pay an awful lot of money for them.
It's carried through from so many years ago to now be prized possessions.
Yes.
Is there still a tradition of painting in the Roses and Castles style?
Oh, yes. I would say there must be at least 100 people in this country that do it for a living because they are commissioned to do it. I myself have got a water can.
Julia, from the point of view of the Canal Museum, just how buoyant, excuse the pun, is the tourism part of the canal waterways? How important are they to Britain, and by extension, how important are they to Northamptonshire?
I think they're extremely important. I mean, we talked about the height of the industry on the canals, but there's actually more people using the waterways today than there ever have been before. Partially that's because of COVID, lockdowns. People were discovering that the towpaths are free, accessible spaces that are owned and operated by Canal and River Trust, which in itself is a charity, which is looking to get more people on the water, because a lot of scientific research has indicated that people's general health, well-being and their mood is alleviated by being near bodies of water.
And as you speak, you may just be able to hear in the background a low note, a sort of rumbling sound. That is actually a narrowboat which has just left from one of the mooring points directly outside the Canal Museum. So, as we sit here now talking, the business of the inland waterways has shifted. Maybe from heavy cargo, it's now shifted to the cargo being self-loading, namely the public, and people like you and I enjoying the waterways. Lorna, why should this item, as it is, be in the exhibition?
It shows a style, because there are many styles of roses and castles, and it depends on where the object is painted and who it's painted by. Frank Nurser was very quick and easy.
And he was a local man?
He was definitely a local man, the family were, yes.
Julia, let me ask you the same question. Why do you feel this item should be in the exhibition? And what does it say about Northamptonshire, given that Frank Nurser worked just a short distance away from where we're sitting?
It's certainly the finest example that we've got in our collection of one of his painted objects. But I mean, like Lorna said, it's at the crossroads. It was painted in the early 50s, and Frank Nurser died in 1952. The nationalisation of the canals happened during World War II. So really, a lot of those painters are at the crossroads of the industry coming to an end and the start of the commercialisation of these kinds of crafts for greater members of the public. And I think it's a lovely encapsulation of what life on the canals would have been like.
And what the life on the canals is now like, because these items are still prized and you can still see them from day to day, as we have been seeing whilst we've been here at the Canal Museum. Julia, Lorna, thank you for bringing to life the change in the industry from heavy goods to perhaps lighter goods, and an industry that we can all enjoy on the water and here at the Canal Museum. Thank you very much indeed for talking to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.